Addendum contract. You're live, it says.
You ready, Bert? Okay, we'll call the meeting to order at 9:06. First is adoption of the agenda.
Move as presented.
Okay. Any questions on that? Call the question, all in favor? That's approved. Next is adoption of the minutes. Is there any additions or changes?
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes as presented.
Okay, a motion. Any questions on the motion? All in favor? That's carried.
Very good. We have no delegations or a strategic thinking portion for today. I will have an email that goes out to everyone. The business plan should be available on the website, but I'll make sure that we get a copy of it into your hands as well. And we are reviewing it monthly now at our monthly managers meetings. So we have a couple of ECDev components to deliver before the end of the year, so we'll make sure that we stay on track on all of those. And that was really it for right now under the strategic part.
Okay. First on the agenda is 6.1, Wild Alberta Tourism Guide 2022.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have, on an annual basis, participated in the Wild Tourism Guide, and unfortunately, due to some circumstances beyond our control this year, the guide is a little bit delayed, but we are working with the contractor. They are actually going to press later on today, so this literally is our last opportunity to make any changes. So what we've put together is we're doing a one-page ad and then the two-page recreation map for Woodlands County as the spread within the magazine. The verbiage and everything that's there is very similar to an existing tourism piece we had, and we've added in some photos from the photo contest. But please let me know if you see any edits or changes you'd like to see us make on those 3 pages.
Oh, no, I'm good.
Yeah, when I reviewed it after it came out, it looks good to me. I don't really see anything that's glaringly omitted. If some new project comes on stream, we can always revise it for next year, right?
Yep. Pardon me, absolutely 100%. And because we're so late in the season, we normally would have a couple of more events listed, but we don't really have any July events for the county that are big ones. So the open farm days on the Hamlet Hoedown, and we do have a spelling correction on Hoedown. We know that's got to be one word, and she's caught that. We just didn't have a chance to get the draft updated for last week. But those are probably the main things on the event part of it. That's really kind of the main way that it differs from past years. That, and then with the inclusion of some of the photos and honorable mentions from our photo contest last year.
Okay, then I'd move to accept or approve the Wild Alberta Tourism Guide advertisement as presented.
Just one question, I guess. The only thing that I saw there was that I didn't see the wildland park area included in the natural playground park, the one that's Pride Valley.
Yeah, if you
Which one is that?
If you look on page 11,
Okay.
top right-hand corner, Fort of Assiniboine Sandhills Wildland Provincial Park. Is that the one you're speaking of?
Yeah. And then what about? Oh, I guess no. The Holmes Crossing one is in Barhead County, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay, sorry.
But both the Sandhills and the
Yeah.
Wildland Provincial Park are both mentioned on that one frame.
Okay.
Any more questions on the motion?
Just have one more quick comment. Just one comment in the future, one thing that I would do, I totally see why they put coming events with a published date now, but I would have suggested putting all of our events, even the ones that are past, because when someone's seeing this, they're not gonna know when it was published.
Right.
And then they would know going forward, if we had this event this year, then we're probably having a mud bog next year, for example.
When we get into the updates part of it, we'll have a chance to talk a little bit about the Wild Alberta website, where we'll have more of a static presence for the county within that part of it. And we'll have kind of a running listing, hopefully without dates, just as you're mentioning.
Okay, perfect.
Any more questions? Call the question, all in favor? It's carried.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Next up under new business is the 2022 photo contest. So, as I mentioned, we did the 2021 photo contest, and the summary and some of the information on it is there. For those of you that were in the trade show booth, we actually had the binder of the printed pictures, and the one part of the trade show this year that I will not forget is the lady that came up and pointed to the picture and said, "Oh my gosh, that's my backyard." so it was actually kind of interesting, and yes, it was her photo as well. So, but it was just kind of one of those interesting coincidences. So we have it in the budget as a budgeted item to do the photo contest again, and in conversation with communications, and in part because of the value that we get as well. We want to put the proposal forward that we would do a photo contest as per the attachments with the rules and all of that. If we were to sign up to a stock photo company source, it's going to cost us at least that $2,000, and then we don't have images that are local images, right? So it would give it. There are other image banks that are out there that we can buy into, but this is actually a really good value for the pricing, and we seem to have a lot of interest from residents as well.
Questions or comments? Tricia?
I just wanted to clarify, because you said there's 2,000 allocated for the photo contest, and there's the 3 categories.
Yeah.
So the first prize was $150, like about $300 in cash and prizes each.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to check, so is that only then 3 prizes, 3 winning photos? For
Yes.
$900 in total?
So the proposal is, yes, is we would do the faces, places, and, I should have had it memorized. Faces, places, and, farms, would be the 3 categories. And then for each one, the proposal is, and it puts us on par with other municipal photo contests that we've had a chance to kind of follow and benchmark. They do about $150 to $250 grand prize. So we thought if we did 150 cash and then 150 in promo items. And so the promo items, that's actually an excellent question, because I've got that would more so come out of our promo item budget than out of this budget. So what we were looking at was about 450 in cash for the prizes, and then it would be about 1,500 towards the advertising in our social media campaign and in the marketing of this directly, and then that other 450 would come out of the promo items that we have that are already in stock that we've purchased out of, because we have an annual purchase of 7,500 for promo items,
Right.
and so it would have just been.
Okay, so just to clarify then, 1,550 of the budget is going towards advertising and promoting the program?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and is that, like, where would it be promoted? That's gonna be in the newspaper?
Yes,
So
so-
that would be an extra expense over the ads that
No.
Woodlands already pays for?
No, so the pricing we've done, and again, if we had more to work with, we would certainly do a little bit more. But I believe the intent was it gives us either 1 or 2 ads to run in both of the White Court papers and for the Woodlands Express. So that was kind of how we had put the advertising budget together, and then the rest would be through our social media channels. And I think Nikita's got priced in there some some Facebook and some Google advertising as well, so that if you're, so very similar to the type of advertising that we've done with the Golden Triangle. So you'll end up going on to a Facebook page for the region, and you may see the ad pop up, county photo contest.
Okay,
Oh.
now,
Oh, sorry.
Were you done, Patricia?
I just have one more
Yeah,
other
yeah.
thing, sorry. The only other thing I wanted to add was just curious if there was any room to open it up, so this is 3 prizes, to add a junior prize and put it out to kids under 18. So that you have, just something to engage the kids in a county thing.
Considering
I
every
don't.
kid has a phone.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why we couldn't add that. The only thing that Nikita's finding on the back end on the communication side, and this is where if you go into, not the release form, but under the submission rules,
Yeah.
he's gotten pretty specific on the types of photos and the pixel rate and some of that. And it's basically just simply because for us to be able to use them in the formats we want to use them, those are the technical specs. So that would be my only concern, would be that if we open it up to youth, those pictures would have to meet those same technical specs. But like you just said, they're probably more savvy with some of the phone cameras and things than we are in regards to settings and whatnot, so. But yeah, I mean, we certainly have room. I mean, it is the committee's contest, so we certainly have room.
So what I was gonna suggest is that we accept this in principle and just ask you to send out a budget.
Mhm.
Because I mean, I think there were some budgetary questions there that you sort of know what's going on, Bert, but I don't think we really know the mechanics. But what I'm sensing is everybody wants to go ahead with the project. And considering the nominal amount, I think we can approve it pending a budget, and perhaps you could incorporate the youth portion into it.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. Do you want the prize value for the youth to stay the same as well then?
I guess my take on it is it probably should,
Okay.
just because they're young, shouldn't mean they're less than.
That probably makes good sense.
And they'd probably argue that it should be more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll revise our categories then. Sorry, I lost my page. So we'll have faces, places, farms, and youth. That sounds like the direction we're headed.
So I wasn't quite finished actually.
Okay.
So I was prepared to make a motion to what I just said.
maybe just let Art speak first.
Just a quick question, and the thing that I like about the contest, and the clarification I just want from Bert is around copyright. And after doing a stint with Alberta Education and copyright on learning objects, this becomes a really important figure. So Bert, from the way that you've got that worded in image use, would it be fair to say that Woodlands has copyright on the images?
Yes.
And
So,
that's so important from a historical point of view as the county moves forward. Maybe 20 years from now, somebody wants to do a story about how Woodlands has changed. You can go into these image banks and you're fine. As far as the image requirements for most cameras on your phone would exceed the image requirements for digital use and placement of all these things. So with the technology that's available now, I think that's pretty good. And the real hidden value here in the contest is the copyright of those images.
thank you very much for that, and it really is very much worth crediting Nikita, our communications officer, and our legislative services team for going through and for investigating and doing the benchmarking and comparison to other contests, because we now have a really good rules template that we've used. This will be the second photo contest, but similar rules in place for those naming contests and for those kinds of things as well. So yeah, it's a team effort to put all of this together. So Nikita, thank you very much. And Corinne, thank you very
We pay
much.
hundreds or thousands of dollars for images to include them in learning objects and stuff like that. So there is a real hidden value to this. So it's great to have it.
Go ahead.
Maybe we could create one of those NFTs or whatever they call it and sell it.
Yeah.
Some Bitcoin on the side, you never know. So I'll wade into this motion and we can decide whether it says what we want it to say, but I move that the Economic Development Committee approve the Woodlands County Photo Contest 2022 as presented, pending budget being sent out by email from Bert. Does that make sense?
Any questions on the motion? Call the question, all in favor? Carried.
Thank you, and Ellen, I'm doing my best to write that down verbatim, so.
Next is the work plan update.
Okay.
To you, Bert.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, so we'll start with Growth, Rita, and Wild Alberta, and Councillor Kulkin in your role as our rep to Rita and Wild, and now in your new role as vice chair of the committee. I'm going to lean on you a little bit, but I did have a good conversation yesterday with Mayor DeBush from Mayor Thorpe, and both the 2021-22 synopsis and the 22-23 ops plan for the Rita are ready to be submitted, and we are waiting for final word on the TRF grant. It's been moved through to the next phase of summary, and I'll leave my short summary there, and Councillor Kulkin, if you want to add any details, we certainly can.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that we're attempting to do now, it's been a working board, it's been a real workload especially for Walter and Janet, and we've had a lot of difficulty in the structural part of it, which Bert and Jenny and Sherry, which are the EDOs that work on this, have helped us out with. So we're entertaining the idea right now of hiring an individual who currently is managing 19 different municipalities that are in the Palliser Economic Partnership in Southern Alberta. And he has a really good handle on the structural and admin piece that we need filled so that it's done professionally, because as elected officials, we, personally myself and we just don't have those skill sets. And in order for these REITs to survive, we really need to start to have a look at the structural part of it so that we don't have the failures that we've had in the past. So that's what we're working on. I think that the wild component is a really good piece of that puzzle, because I think it's going to be very successful, which is a good thing for the RETA. I think one of the things that's happened with our participation in the CiteLink conference, it's really opened the eyes of the people that attended there, how important it is to develop the regional base more. So what we're doing is there's a group of us that are going to go out to different municipalities and present the importance of the participation, because we know that economic development is going to happen regionally. It's not going to happen just here. It's not going to happen in just Fort Assiniboine, and that if something happens in Wood Buffalo or in Lac-La-Biche, or there's huge potential for us. And the other part of it is, which is really interesting, is that because the CiteLink was launched here in Woodlands, there is a huge interest from all of the different municipalities now to figure out how to get these rural economic or regional economic developments going. And I think that pretty much captures what we talked about.
Yeah, I think that's a really good summary. Because the synopsis and the ops plan are still in draft form and haven't been submitted to Jobs, Economy and Innovation yet, We didn't have them quite ready to present to everybody today, but once we have the final copy, we can certainly send them out. But really, the intent with both of those is it fulfills the grant requirement for the funding that the RETA gets from JEI on the annual basis. And then by laying out the ops plan for next year, we did have the strategic planning meeting for the RETA back at the beginning of May. And based on that, that's where the executive has worked to lay out the ops plan for next year. So the thing that I think both Councillor Culkin and I have kind of pushed for, there are a lot of alignments in strategy between our new Woodland strategic plan and what we want to do with economic development here. And we've been able to, I'll say, positively influence the RETA. Is that a fair way to to say it? But there is a pretty strong alignment, I think, with the 5 RETA partners that we have, and it looks like we've got more staffing coming and an action plan for next year.
Alan?
So with respect to Wild, is there any engagement by the tourism operators?
At this point, yeah, it is starting, yeah.
So what, can you describe what?
Well, they've been invited to participate on, I think, 3 different levels?
Yes, yeah. So the planning meetings that we've been doing for Wild Alberta since about this time last year, we've had about, there's probably about a dozen operators total that are involved. And on any given meeting, we'll have probably anywhere from, I would say, 6 to 8 of them that are at the meeting and that have been part of the Wild Executive and have been part of the planning. We know that there is a huge opportunity to grow that number, but we are certainly seeing involvement and interest from some of the operators in the area. But as Councillor O'Cloughlin had mentioned, we need to do a lot more recruiting and a lot more awareness on behalf of both the RETA and of Wild. And I think as we have another staff member come on, that I think that's really going to help significantly, because right now the board's putting a lot of time in on the administrative part of it. And this, I think, will free up some of the board members to go out and do some of the ambassadorship and recruiting and that kind of thing that we've identified that Wild has to do.
Well, the cautionary tale as well, to add to what Bert is saying, is that there was this, again, it's not something that is done in a way that is undermining it, but it's just that lack of knowledge of how important it is that we don't get this idea that the operators are going to be funding this down the road completely, because that's not going to happen. And so in order for us to have some continuity, the RETA has to continuously be the central focus of the organization, which Wild is an arm of, like a corporate arm of. And we've had a little bit of trouble convincing the committee that that is something that has to stay, because it will not survive on its own. And so what we're trying to do is get that professional element in there to make sure the committee understands that we do want them to manage and operate that entity, but it still has to be an arm with the oversight from the municipalities who are involved. So I think that pretty much is where we're sitting right now, and it's going to take some work from the professional side to convince the committee, who's done a tremendous amount of work, to understand that the operators are a very important component, but they will never be able to fund the entire or access the funding that the municipal RETA will be able to do. So
I think that's a great point, what you had mentioned, Peter, about that, because with the operators, and a lot of the operators are small scale, but my comment basically was, now that with having an administrator in place and so on, if that's the case, I think a lot of operators aren't aware of what Wild is. So when you said about this outreach and so on, if they have it in their budget, that's something that they may want to really actually get back into billboards and some newspaper ads and stuff like that, calling, calling out to these operators so that they know. Because I know even when we had the joint tourism in prior, some of the billboards actually caught quite a bit of attention.
Yeah, and if we're fortunate enough to get that TRF funding, that's gonna give a whole lot of life into that Wild Alberta program. And I think we've presented kind of that at previous meetings, but in the grant itself, there are some pretty pointed marketing exercises to make sure that we kind of hit the ground running and increase the profile of Wild right away. And I know one of the key ones that we talk about, and especially with having Marvin Polis on side, is the ability for him to do the live podcast. And so that's part of it, is if we end up with that TRF funding, we'll have a weekly podcast that we'll be able to put out to folks to promote what we have happening within the region on the tourism side of things. And I know Marvin sort of sees that as one of the key tools, because when you can start to create that excitement and then kind of spread the word, so to speak, we're hoping that that's going to help to raise the profile as well as to recruit more of the private operators as well.
Well, and one of the things that always has been a question is the metric. How do we measure that? And I guess that's one of the things that Marvin is looking at is that once we increase that profile, they have said that we want to increase the amount of tourism that happens in this region by this volume. So we don't know exactly how much impact Wild is going to have, because there's a number of reasons that that's going to change. But what's really interesting for me is that our understanding from a board perspective was that in order for us to really get a good buy-in from other municipalities who have either opted out or have never participated, is we actually have to go and speak to them, show them how we leverage the funding that they put in and what that looks like from an investment perspective. The problem that we have is we need to have people who are actually interested in not only developing tourism, but developing economic interests within their region. And so how do you do that? And what we came up with was we're going to go out there, we're going to ask these municipalities participate for 1 year without funding, but we want somebody who is very interested in regional economic development. Otherwise, there's no point.
Right.
You know, because we're struggling to try to keep the existing municipalities, because they didn't understand until Bert put this site link together and they participated and they went, holy crap, you know, this is bigger than what we saw. So these are some of the things that we're doing.
I can see one of the keys, like when it comes to tourism and economic development, especially in county areas, one of the barriers could be people are looking at it and they're putting this time and investment into it, but when it comes to the bottom line, how much is the county dollars and cents wise gaining from it? So I think one of the ways, when you said, how do you measure it, how do you monetize it, one of the benefits that I see with this, and I think in my mind would be a focus, is if we can bring people here as tourists, you know, essentially they're coming here to enjoy our outdoor spaces. These are people we want to attract to move here, you know, so that as we're building our business community and our resources and expanding those, then the more tourists we can bring and get familiar with our area, they either themselves, their friends, family, whatever, can say, oh, I play in Woodlands County and that's a place I would like to live. So I think that's a measure of success for tourism that we should be looking at, as opposed to how many hotel rooms is it gonna fill, because we don't have those hotels. In addition to supporting, you know, county places like, you know, for example, I think of like Goodwin Meadows, or, you know, some of these local operators that we want to be supporting them, but in addition, bringing these people to our area.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely, you hit the nail on the head there. And the Woodlands RV and Marina was a good example of a measurement that we have in the community, because 2 or 3 years after that place filled up, we have people now that don't go there anymore, and open spaces there because they've bought property right close to the, so we know that what you're saying is exactly the benefit of what we're trying to accomplish.
I think if we're looking for economic indicators or metrics, you know, we've had a number of events, the mud run, the poker rallies, the other things that have happened where we have the number of people that participated, the hotel rooms or the economic spin-off that comes from that, and a much broader picture. And I think that if people are going to be convinced as we come out of COVID to get back into tourism, and we can use those kinds of metrics, then I think we're also kind of laying some stones for the larger RETA itself to adopt a more tourism view. But you do have to come at them with those kind of metrics. We had 500 people that showed up for this event. On an average, they did a questionnaire, they spent $400 or $800, whatever it was, in coming to the event, participating and seeing our region. And then, keep building on those kinds of metrics, and the partners will come forward on it.
So, sorry, did I cut you off? You're good. Yeah, and to that end, just to follow on that point, the RETA's not putting on the mud run, but the RETA could ask the organizers of the mud run, can we do an extra exit interview? Put up a little table, this is who we are, this is what we support, and have the participants come through. And
That's a good point.
We've already identified the Wildland Sports Run as being one of those key podcasts that we can do next year, right, as part of the wild part of things, and Monty is completely on board with that idea. So he did have about 200 people that participated this year, and I have kind of a draft presentation, but I didn't have all the final numbers and everything ready for everybody today. So I'll have a chance to present those to you at our next meeting. But he did have a very successful event, and folks from all over. He had about 200 runners and about 400 people on site for each of the 2 days from what his initial numbers were. So undoubtedly it had a very positive effect, just as the committee's just been talking about.
Okay, is that it on growth, RETA, and Wild Alberta? So next is agricultural profile.
Okay, so we are doing another advertising push on the naming contest. We have only one submission so far, so we're pushing that back out through social media again to, I shouldn't say we have one submission. We have one submission with several entries. So we do have that, but we certainly are looking for more folks to submit on the naming contest. And on the agricultural profile, I mentioned it when we were talking about the tourism guide. It's the same contractor that's doing both of those items, and unfortunately there was a bit of a personal health injury, and we're running a couple months behind where we would like to be. So our delivery for the ag profile is likely to be the end of September, possibly the end of October. We're working with the contractor, but Dawn and I are very comfortable with the quality and with everything. It's just due to an injury, there's a couple months delay on things, but things seem to be coming along very well.
our target for that was May, right?
I think originally we had end of July, because I know we, so the,
For the but the naming. was-
for the naming
Yeah.
contest, I have to
Yeah, I think the naming was
go and look. I thought we had the naming open until the end of June. I thought it was from April to the end. I thought we had June 30th.
Could be,
Yeah.
but okay.
Yeah, so So with just a few short days left, yes, that's kind of where we're at. So I know Nikita has it on his list to do one big last push there. And I know we have all of the details online, but right now my internet isn't working well enough for me to be able to pull it up, and I'm sorry, I don't remember off the top of my head. But I think it was the end of June.
Patricia?
And the published date, then you said you're looking into September, October?
Yes, yeah, because initially we were hoping to have it, I believe it was at the end of August. And so we would have had a very heartfelt conversation with the contractor a few weeks ago. And she's very committed to getting the project done. Like I said, we're not worried about the quality. It was just a matter of there was a personal injury that kind of reduced her ability to work for a couple of months, but she's back at it now, so.
Okay, and I mean this respectfully, but in this case for something like this, what is the normal timeline? Like, it seems to me if something is extended a couple of months, we already saw the draft of this profile, did we not? Like, I
No.
would have we
No.
haven't seen the draft?
No.
Oh, okay.
So
My
for the
apologies.
the ag profile, we did kind of a draft outline,
Mhm.
but the actual content and all of that itself, we haven't seen or done yet. And this is our first time for actually doing it, so.
Oh, okay, I see, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, we saw a concept.
That's what I was thinking of, so it's in copywriting and so on, et cetera, which is more time consuming, fair enough, so.
So I've got the website up here, and I'll let you know as soon as I can. I'll move at the speed of the internet. But I think it was the end of June was our initial contest date. So while I'm waiting for that to come up, are there any other questions, concerns on the ag profile?
And next is Lemonade Day.
How was it?
It was good. It's always fun going.
So in the end, we had two booths that kind of completed all of the requirements and everything going through the process. But yes, Councillor Prestige, you were one of our illustrious judges.
Two booths, one was kind of a family that did it, and there was 4 kids. Did a great job. The other one was 2 little girls, one was 7 and one was 8. And they actually did a fantastic job. Their booth, they were selling flowers and all kinds of things, plus their lemonade. And they go through a lot of work to get it done. And it's nice to see. The one won the best stand, and the other group won the best business.
Nice.
And from what I hear, they made a lot of money. It was kind of funny. Somebody went and paid it forward for the next people,
Oh, nice.
but they said, no, we're paying 2. And lemonade was $1 each, and then everybody's leaving $20, and so the kids did very well.
That's great.
Excellent.
I think that one of the things that we have to understand here too is that that's an incredible way to start to engage our kids in the social fabric of our community. And I think that, I didn't realize it as much, but when the counselors are there and, are visible, there's a better connection there, because I had a talk with my son about that afterwards, and he said, he says, we never had any of that. So he says, council and people who are in municipal government will always divorced from the kids. So I think this is a good step, and we can really expand on something like this to engage kids.
Absolutely.
And the kids really get into it.
Oh,
Like the one stand, we had a drink of their lemonade, and it was squeezed lemonade, so it was fairly good. But then she brought this other stuff out. She said, "This is my grandmother's recipe." It was raspberry and vinegar, and they made a raspberry vinaigrette. And they added it into the lemonade, and it was incredible.
That's awesome. No, great to hear for sure.
So next year, please go. You'll really enjoy it. Anything else on lemonade?
No, I think that was it that I had. I know, I guess the one kudos that we should put out is our Community Futures group. I believe they had over a dozen communities this year that were doing Lemonade Day. So it stretches their resources pretty thin and pretty hard, but it is a labor of love for them. So I think thank you to Community Futures Yellowhead East for their hard work to pull it off.
And thanks to Councillor Wilhelm and Williams for judging too.
Nice.
And I can confirm, yes, June 30th is our current cutoff date for the naming contest. Would the county be or the committee, would we be interested in maybe moving that to the end of July or the end of August, given where we're at on entries?
I would think that you know, we're delayed on the other end anyway, so it would serve a purpose for that to happen. It really, the naming would be done when the project is completed. So
Yeah, it can be the last thing.
I think we could do that, and I think it would help, you know, get more involvement as well.
August 31st, would that be fair then?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Okay, and I'll make sure that we're working with communications, and so would that be a motion then, Councillor Cook?
Yeah, I'll make that
to
motion.
change the date?
Just saying, Al had his hand up.
Why do we need the name ahead of the project? Why can't we just coincide it?
Yeah,
Okay. So,
Yeah,
We don't
You're-
know when this project is
Yeah.
gonna come. It might not be until December, so.
yeah, you're right.
But they'll need the name for the printing, will they not?
yeah, September 30th then?
Well, whatever you think, Bert. Like, you have a better gauge on when you think Carol's gonna have things ready.
I'm sure we'll have it out. I'm sure we'll have it out in October. I really want to. I mean, we understand and we care, but we also need to produce a project. So, I think that if we can hold her to a September 30th deadline, that would make the best sense, and have it published in October. So, if we set September 30th for now, we could always adjust it again if we had to. But I think that that's probably pretty fair.
Her deadline is September 30th, could we do September 1st?
Whatever the committee would like.
I don't know what the mechanics are, like, so we approve it, she has something, how long does it take to publish, what?
Once it goes to the publisher, it wouldn't take that long. It would just be a matter of getting that final draft approved, right? So as long as she's got the name in time to be able to know what she has to put on the cover page, I mean.
So you
that's
don't need a month, you just need a matter of a couple
A
days.
couple of days to a week, probably, yeah.
But, I mean, it's just semantics, it doesn't matter to me, I'm just,
Yeah.
Okay.
I was only thinking if there's a title that's catchy, then the columns inside might be named something that ties to the title.
Yeah, and we have mentioned that we would do a short bio, like that's part of the prize package, is we would do a short bio of the family of the winner as well. So she would need time to put that together. So I think if we hold it to September 30th, that gives us plenty of time to look at an October publishing date.
So did you want a motion to that effect, Bert?
Uh,
You need one?
If everybody's amenable with that, yeah, September 30th is probably, I think, a good extension.
Okay, I'll make a motion to extend that to September 30th.
so that's the naming contest, we're extending to September 30th, that's what you're recommending?
Everybody clear with what the motion is? Okay. Call the question? All in favor? That's carried.
Thank you.
Next is the Global Energy Show. Let's see what your notes say.
Okay, well, I want to open with my favorite comment of the whole show. So the nuclear session had just started, and I leaned over to Councillor Prestige and I said, man, I hope this one doesn't blow up. And he just kind of looked at me, and I said, aren't you glad you brought me? And he's like, no. The hydrogen show was incredibly interesting, and of course, had an absolute focus on hydrogen. And I kind of wondered, how is the energy show actually going to be that much different, or is it going to seem very, very similar? The format was very similar because it was just talking head panel after talking head panel for 2.5 days as they kind of go through and have their moderated session. But what was incredibly interesting was the breadth and the scope of what was covered, because they covered everything from how consumer demand has to change so we can better manage the electrical grid, so we don't have to spend $40 billion to upgrade it so that everybody can charge their electric vehicle, to the importance of carbon sequestration, to the importance of reconciliation and making sure we have indigenous groups involved, to how are other countries changing and adapting to carbonization, to how does the energy mix look for Canada going forward, because different regions of the country are going to have different focuses and all of that. The breadth of the information was absolutely incredible. And I can inundate everybody with notes, but that's not my intent. I'll try to hit up on some of the high parts, the high notes of things. So I think the main thing overall is with COP26 and with where we're at with the UN and the International Energy Agency and all of that, everyone is realizing and reacting to the climate change part of things that we're going through. Depending on who you talk to, we can still manage it. Some folks say we're past the tipping point. There's a whole political spectrum and everything that's there. But the reality is that most countries are looking at what are the ways that we can decarbonize and do something more and different with energy. So that's one part of the equation. The second part of the equation is what's incredibly interesting, and we've heard this, of course, through what Europe is going through with Ukraine and Russia and all of that, oil and gas is not going away. Oil and gas is going to be part of the energy mix until at least through till 2050, probably 2070 and beyond. But the question will be, how do we use those feedstocks? Because they're still going to make up a portion of the energy mix. But the question is going to be, do we sequester the carbon? Do we switch it over to hydrogen? Do we switch it to ammonia? Do we use our existing energy stocks to kind of better fuel and do different things with renewables? For me, the main takeaway of the entire conference is there's no silver bullet when it comes to energy. And a lot of the speakers talked about, instead it's a silver shotgun, right? You have this energy mix, very different approach, and especially when you look at Canada, the way that we're going to approach energy in the West is very different to how energy is going to be approached in the East based on the natural resources that are available to us. So right now, Ontario is about 60% nuclear. And Ontario will move probably closer to 80 to 85% nuclear as time goes on, whether it's through small nuclear reactors or through bigger, large nuclear reactors. New Brunswick is pretty much the same way. Quebec will be largely hydro. Manitoba will be largely hydro. The big question on decarbonization in Canada is the north, because everything is based on diesel. And so how do you replace the energy grid in the north if you don't use diesel as your feedstock? And that's the big question mark. Nobody really has an answer to that. So we're in a political framework of, we know that by 2030, we have a federal carbon tax that's going to come in that will be from $170 to $190 per ton of carbon that's emitted. How that's going to be applied, how carbon credits and all of that can work. There's a lot of that framework that still needs to sort of work itself out and work itself through. But most of the speakers commented that having certainty in the legislative framework is what's framing their investment decisions that they're making now. So the framework and everything that we've talked about, if we have these 2030 targets and 2050 targets, that's where the focus is. And that's where the investment and the business focus is going to be, because that's the reality that everybody's building to. Now, that being said, Minister Sonia Savage, our provincial minister for energy, had made the comment that since 1986, we've now had, I think it was, she said, 12 different climate action plans for Canada. And we've had 9 different carbon goals, and we haven't hit any of them yet. And when the folks from ASO were talking, and they're giving their piece, and they're talking about the energy grid, it's about 3 years. If you have a brand new power plant go into the ground today, if it was being built today, it's about an 8-year process to get that power plant built, get the contracts and everything signed that they need to have signed so that it can get onto the ASO grid. So it's 2022. So anything that isn't being built this summer will not be ready for 2030. So we've already missed our 2030 deadline for climate. And those are some of my big takeaways. Bruce, how'd I do?
Good. One of the things that I took away from it is everybody is looking for capital. And that is stopping a lot of the growth here, is that people don't have capital. And from what I gathered was a lot of the investors don't want to invest here because of the uncertainty with our government, the legislations. And until we get that straightened out, it's gonna be hard getting investment into our country. And I don't know, there's just so much, it's hard to remember it all.
Well, and so there were some, so day one was sort of a focus on reconciliation and the roles that different groups can play in the energy mix going forward. And Jody Wilson-Raybould had an opportunity to speak, and she did an absolutely wonderful job, I thought. And basically, her comment was, reconciliation is happening, but it has to be authentic, right? You can't just show up and pay lip service to it. And she alluded to a certain individual that she's had a very public past with, who kind of pays lip service to things. She had some great one-liners in her presentation. It was fantastic. But the idea is be inclusive and be authentic, and work to build, just as we had kind of touched on with the Rita part of it. You work together with your regional partners for regional success. That was really part of what she said. The other important part of things, and I'm just trying to find my notes here from Governor Perry. So we had Governor Perry, the former governor of Texas, had a presentation. And basically, about a decade ago, he had led Texas to kind of being the economic growth engine for the U.S. And as part of that, he kind of had 4 points. I know I've got 3 of them in my head. I'll see if I can remember all 4. Oh yeah, so here it is here. So he first he said that he is from southern Alberta, which is Texas, which everybody kind of got a chuckle out of that one. But he said you need to have consistent regulatory policy and consistency in order to allow folks to make investment decisions. And access to export markets is also incredibly essential. And so those are probably the 2 big things that we need to address at the federal and at the provincial level, so that we can recognize the potential that is within our energy industry. And then his comments were, don't over litigate, don't over legislate, make sure that you've got a trained workforce, and make sure that you're working with private business. He says that's how you create jobs, that's how you build and reinforce and create your energy industry. So those are kind of his 4 big takeaways. The energy solution in 2050 will be very different than the energy solution that we're looking for 2030, based on the progression of the technology. And so that kind of led into and was a comment around the whole concept of the carbon sequestration part of things. Because in the West, and when you look at the geological formations worldwide and all of that. Western Canada and the northwest part of the US, because of our geological formations, we are one of the primary areas in the world where we can capture and store carbon. A lot of the areas of the world don't have the geology to be able to make that happen. So as we move forward and we figure out the best way to do the carbon sequestration and storage or carbon separation and all of that, that's going to be one of the key areas that's going to allow us to move the energy industry forward. So on May 3rd was the closure date of the second intake for the province to issue carbon exploration licenses. So the province still doesn't have it fully figured out as to how the legislation is going to work around carbon sequestration and storage, because we know that companies would have the ability to sequester it, but then the question is how many years do they have to monitor it, how liable are they, all of that. Some of that framework still hasn't been fully mapped out. So we have companies and projects that have been announced right now. And the first round was, they had those 7 areas awarded around the industrial heartland area. This second intake opened it up to be province-wide. So we'll use our friends in Greenview as a perfect example. They have 2 large projects that have been announced. If they can't sequester carbon adjacent to those 2 projects, there's no way that they can go ahead, because the legislation by 2030, the carbon tax would be so high that it's going to force them out of business. So carbon sequestration is an essential key, and the way that we pursue it and pursue the licensing of it and how it's going to work is still in the process of being worked out. So that's where it sort of reinforces that commentary on our energy solutions as we get closer to 2030. Like EVs might be the solution between now and 2030. By the time we get to 2050, it might be something completely different, right? So it was kind of interesting that way, just to understand that it really is an absolute energy mix, and the way that this is going to pan out is there's a combination of legislative factors, there's a combination of investment factors, there's a combination of resource factors, and there's a combination of who can be the first one to get to market. So it's incredibly complex.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just a question, like from what you're explaining here in the I guess technological side, and what you had mentioned as far as the investment and the security of the investment, was there any sense that you got that the capital model has to be examined as well within the framework of what we're trying to do? Because what I'm hearing here is that there's a little bit of a gap between what is being attempted, which is definitely something that we need to do, and that we still don't have all the information of where our inequities, some of the things that we talked about with our SiteLink partners, and how do we start looking at the inefficiencies of transporting stuff as compared to doing these things. So was there any kind of sense that you got that there's something that's moving in that direction as well?
It really was interesting, because I mean, at the end of the day, everything is consumer driven, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if the consumer wants it, industry will find a way to deliver it. But there were some interesting comments made around the consumer part of it, because consumer behavior is so fickle now, and it changes, right? And so that's where it almost seems like, I mean, the certainty is we need energy. The uncertainty is, how are people going to want it delivered? What are they socially comfortable with using for their energy mix? And what are they willing to pay? And how does that translate into what industry can deliver, right? And we're seeing that right now with gas prices. There was one question to one of the commenters, which was, is oil going to top $200 a barrel? And he said, no. He said, I absolutely don't think so, because he says you're going to get to about 170, 180, and demand's going to start to drop. And what are we seeing in the news today? Well, people are saying, well, I'm taking transit, I'm not traveling this summer, and demand is starting to drop because you're at the price equilibrium point, right? So I mean, just simple economics. So it's going to be interesting, but consumer demand might change how we finance.
Okay, Ellen?
So a couple of things. The first one, to add to what you said, everything's consumer driven. The other piece of that you alluded to earlier is what the government allows.
Yeah.
Because what our industry is allowed to do here is entirely different than what goes on in Venezuela or Nigeria or Saudi or anywhere else. So, we've been hearing, I'm sure you guys are no different than me, been hearing this messaging for the past, since I was a kid, that, the government has to set the table for industry. And so that message certainly hasn't changed. But the other thing I wanted to add was just from a meeting protocol point of view, Bert, we've been over half an hour on the work plan update. Like, could we get some of this in point form so we can just review it and ask questions rather than have you, give a verbal report on
Sure.
it? I don't know how the rest of you guys feel, but it's just, it's been, just about 40 minutes that we've been discussing this, and I think if it was presented in point form, similar to what you did with the site link, you sent out all those things, and the person can go through and ask questions.
I just want to follow up on your comment on that, because we have spent a lot of time working on these updates, and we've sacrificed the in-committee sessions and even some of the information items because we've run out of time at these meetings. So I really like your idea. I was toying with the idea of flipping the agenda, requesting that we flip the agenda and do the important items that often get left to the end, or even undecided, or even undiscussed, and have them forward, and then bring this stuff up.
Sure.
In that point form is a really good idea. We spent 40 minutes talking about lemonade last meeting,
Right.
right?
Yeah. And if I could just follow on that, what I'm trying to do is be productive with my time, and thereby everybody else's time. And I just find that, these meetings, the last one was well over 4 hours. And we've taken 2 or 3 things out of the agenda, and we're already an hour in, and we haven't really dug into what I was expecting of this committee.
Won't matter anyway. What's that?
I guess, I understand that, because the reason that we are having this discussion or what I'm trying to get out of this, what you guys brought back, in what your concepts were, was because we're an economic development committee. So what we need to do is we need to really understand the dynamic of what is going on outside of these perimeters, outside of our area, because we are going to try to develop an economic strategy for our region. And so that's kind of why, I'm trying to understand, so desperately understand the complexities of this, so that, down the road, once we get to an action point where we're going to move on something other than something that's just, local engagement. I think that if we can have, that it's a good point if we can have that streamlined a little bit, and then we can get into the meat and potatoes and say, how are we going to position ourselves?
100%.
I'd just like to add to that as well. I think this discussion is really good around this, and to kind of tie a little bit of what everybody's just said. I think I would like to move that we put the in-committee session at the beginning of the agenda. So, because if it's something that is important that we're dealing with, and I realize that breaks up the part of the meeting that's online, so I know it can create a challenge there. But to move the work plan updates to the end, like you had mentioned, just because in the essence of time, if there is something we have to cut, then that's something that we could cut that discussion shorter than some of the in-committee items. Also, I really want the update from the Global Energy Show, from SiteLink, you know, so I think you guys going and feeding that info back to the committee is exceptionally important, and we definitely don't want to lose that discussion. But just having those few points, like Alan mentioned, come out in the package ahead of time, kind of gives us a hit on what we want to ask.
Right.
You
Yep.
know, so that
Yep.
might be, doesn't have to be any, for me, it wouldn't have to be anything fancy. It could literally be, you know, maybe the 10 points from your notes that you just made.
Mhm.
But if they're there, then we know ahead of time what to ask you about for the things that have caught our interest.
I just got something to say. The reason there's no in committee this time was there was nothing to bring up.
Oh, no, I didn't.
Yeah.
Perfect,
For
yeah.
everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But
Oh, yeah,
I
for sure.
decided on this meeting, the Global Energy Show and the SiteLink were our two most important things to bring up. There was really nothing other than that was pressing.
Perfect.
So we decided to do more of a discussion on these two items, and we'll probably still be done within 2.5 hours. So we can go either way. You just want it in point form and read it yourself, or we can do it here and have discussions. So
Well, I think what we're saying is we want both. We'd like a point form that gives us a frame of reference for questions that we want to ask.
okay.
Because when you're listening to a verbal discussion, you don't know what's coming next, right? You don't have, you're not sure whether they're going to get to point number 6 that you want to talk about.
And I just want to lead by example or follow by example. When we did the Energy Futures Labs and we had that discussion, I attended those and gave Bert some detailed notes on each of the presentations, and it was nice to bring that back to committee because you could get that overall picture without having me to say everything that happened in those sessions, right?
Right.
And then we had a much more productive discussion around that. And I do feel a little bit of your frustration in that in the last 3 meetings that we've had, I felt that we never got to discuss some of the most important things that we needed to do as a committee because we spent too much time on the work plan updates verbatim. So I think what we're looking for is a common compromise where we've got those notes. The other thing that I want to say is even though we have our committee meetings and our kind of work focuses around the meetings, I've had almost weekly discussions with Bert on my own about some of these ideas, the concepts, the reasoning behind them, so that I didn't have to ask these questions in the committee meetings that we're having.
Yep.
So I want to, Bert knows Art's going to phone me on Friday because the meeting's next week and he's going to have a few questions, and that's been very productive and one of the things that happens behind the scenes in my 3 years of work with Bert. So encourage committee members to do that as well, and then we can get to our top 3 questions, and I really do like your plan for this meeting where we're going to talk about SiteLink and global energy. Everybody knows I'm really passionate about that, but I do think the if you brought back 2 pages of notes with your key things from that, just the 4 points that you made even on that, I would go, yep, that's great. I know that they're there, and then let's talk about how it applies to Woodlands County and how we can build that development here.
Yeah.
And as chairing the meeting too, what I'm finding is on, let's say, Lemonade, everybody's got to have a voice, but they're all saying the same thing. So that extends the meeting longer. If somebody said something that you agree with, you don't have to give your voice too. So it'll speed the meeting up. Okay, so are we done with global energy?
I think that's it, unless anyone has any other questions.
Let's just-
The only other comment I wanted to make, so we had inquired to see, because they were videotaping each of the sessions, so we had inquired to see if those videos were available, and unfortunately, they're not. They do videotape them, but they only use them for their internal use.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was gonna ask that.
One other thing that really struck home with me was, it was the president or CEO of ATCO Electric. And she said by 2050, with how the energy is looking for that time frame, the electrical grid and power generation has to quadruple. And then she said, and who's gonna pay for it? And there is only one source the money comes from. It's the end user.
Yeah.
And if it's the government that pays for it, the taxpayer pays for it. So this is gonna be a heavy hit on everybody.
That's pretty valuable information to have going forward.
So now I'd like to get to a question about the conference, and that is to one of your main points, which is the importance of working with private business. And I want to cross this over with a discussion about SiteLink, because that was one of the key takeaways that I had from that brief session that I was able to attend. And the need for no over-regulation or over-legislation in the role of the government, because some of the things that we want to do here in the county are not going to happen until this government and the political influences on the corporate side, until those things get ironed out. And this is turning into a persistent problem for the county, because the lack of leadership by the provincial government on some of these issues, especially as it relates to oil and gas companies and their taxes and the tax base of the county, that through our councillors, and I know that you're pressing on this, that the rural municipalities need to have a much better playing field with the provincial government, in the same way that the provincial government is asking for a better deal from Canada. And I think that's a fair point, and I don't want to belabor any more conversation on that.
Well, and I tend to agree with that, and it's something that we as council struggle with, partly because there's an experience level that has had experience in exactly what you're talking about, and there is the more youthful experience level which wants to fight this type of a situation in the judiciary, and it serves no purpose if the legislation is wrong to have an argument within the judiciary, because you know that the judiciary is going to agree with the legislation as it's interpreted. And I think this is a discussion that we need to have, in depth at council, where we start to understand that once something gets to the judiciary, you've already lost the battle, because you're no longer in control of it. We need to be in the legislators' faces as a municipality, not only as us as a municipality, but every rural municipality through the RMA, because that's the only place that we have that power. So I absolutely agree with that point.
Okay, with that, we'll move over to SiteLink.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
thank you everybody for your support. We did it. It was an amazing experience. I have to admit, in my professional career, it was probably the top event that I've attended, and it was absolutely amazing, the caliber of people that we had here, not just within the site selectors, but the attendees, and for our sponsoring partly positive environment. Our intent was to create an opportunity to build new relationships and to rub elbows with folks that we hadn't met before. And I think we did that very well, and we've had some great follow-up conversations ever since. And as I put it to one of my coworkers the other day, we've lit the fire, now we just have to keep pouring the gas on. And that's kind of the way I'm feeling. It was an incredible showing from everybody that was involved, I thought.
I guess if I may,
Yes.
one of the things, Bert, that I've found is that this happened is how much more, we need to involve our individual councils with something like this, because, you know, we were working with, you know, in that contractor, you know, trying to figure out who we could afford to have at these sessions, but I really find that this was a huge education for me, and I'm lucky that I was able to attend this as the reader representative, because we were a sponsor, and so I had a little different, you know, ability, but, you know, it would have been really, really encouraging for all of our council to participate in every part of that, which is something we didn't know at the time. You know, so I guess, you know, I got the real sense that there's going to be some economic development people that are going to try to get this conference happening again here in a different location. In fact, I think Paige is even going up to Lac La Biche this fall and this is a place where your ECDev people and your councils, you need to push your council to have funding for those folks to get there, because then everybody gets a solid understanding of how important this is, and then we come back to the table with a totally different perspective. Because had I not been there, I would not have had that experience. And you know, the relationships that you build with these folks, they're ordinary people like us. They're people who are looking to make the world a better place given the geopolitical things that are going on, have a very broad a knowledge base, and there also is a very good understanding of how economic development happens, and some of the little nuances that you would never expect. So, you know, going down the road, I would like to see more of our municipal elected officials and committees that are directly linked to economic development being able to participate.
Right on.
Yeah, and to that end, I think it's hindsight's always 20/20, so it's easy to go, we could have done this, could have done it this way. But considering we were hosting it, I think there probably would have been an opportunity to work with Paige and say, hey, you know, we want this group of people there too. They could be called host, you know, or ambassadors or whatever, and work on a funding formula. So you come up with a cost. He has his regular attendee conference fee of $1,500 or $1,600, and maybe the committee and the council, because we're hosting, was a different price, and you build that into the conference, and you spread that out through sponsorships and through attendees, because I really want to echo what Peter said, and you know, I recognize your point about reiterating a point, but I just can't stress how important it is for this group of people, and specifically for council, to attend that. You know, somehow my name got missed for the invite to the Wednesday evening, and I didn't even know that was happening, so I didn't get a chance to even do that. You know, my first exposure to that group was at the supper, and you know, it was pretty clear that there was an energy in that room, if you will, that could translate to something tangible for us. But you know, now I'm left with trying to communicate with these guys through LinkedIn and emails and stuff, and so it's really, that was an opportunity lost. The other question I had was, do we have an attendee list? Can we follow up with that attendee with our own survey? What were their takeaways? What were the positives? What would they like to see for improvements? We may host another one of these things. Can you send that attendee list out to this committee so we can have a look at who was there?
Yeah, so three things. So first of all, I sincerely apologize. I don't know how I missed your name on the email that I had sent to the committee members. I am very sorry, because when I asked Paige about how can our committee participate, the answer was, well, if they want to come to the conference itself, they need to pay to be at the conference. There was no separate negotiation. It was a hard no. If you're gonna be at the conference itself, pay to be there. That's his model. He's never deviated from that and the other ones that he's done. So that was that part of it. That was where working with him, the working takeaway was being able to have the committee come to be part of the reception on the Wednesday before everything started, and then being able to be here on the Saturday morning for the presentations, and then the Saturday evening dinner, which it was an add-on that we paid for through the meeting hosting part of the economic development budget. So that was where we were able to set up those 3 opportunities. The retrospect in working with Paige was we did have a couple of attendees that had shared an attendee slot. So St. Albert, for example, they had one person there one day, one person there the next day. And that's something that we probably should have done. We probably should have, in order to have council specifically come to attend, we probably could have bought 1 or 2 more spots and then swapped some councilors out if people couldn't make it for the full event. So that would have been, that's certainly kind of one of the big takeaways. In regards to the survey that was sent out was the one that Paige and I developed together. So if there's other questions we want to ask, we certainly can do our own. But basically, I was the one that put that survey together and then had sent it to Paige last week for him to vet and to send out. So if there's more questions that we need to ask, we can probably do our own, but really the bulk of those questions that are in the survey that exist as it is now were the questions that Paige and I had put together, but we can make edits.
I didn't get that survey.
Yeah, on the, so if you have the email with all of the presentations, yeah,
Mhm.
if you, as you scroll
it's in
down,
there?
yeah,
Okay.
there's a site link
Okay.
survey that's there.
Okay, all right.
There's another thing, Bert, as well, that I would suggest that, I was fortunate, I went to the presentation, I was the only council member there on for the Saturday morning.
Yeah.
And what was interesting about that one was that I didn't really know how much work was being done on other projects in the province. And I don't think any of us really know what some of the developments are in the north that we really need to link to. And so I'm just wondering if it serves a purpose at some point in time for us to understand a little better what different economic development committees and groups are doing in the province, because we really need to have that information, because I know that, what was it, Mr. O'Rourke?
Yep.
What was his first name?
Andrew.
Andrew. The presentation he gave was phenomenal. Well, you guys were here for that. And I really think I got the little thing and I went through it. He gave me a zip thing and I went through it again and I'm going, holy crap. We really need to do some work here.
So that goes back to the dilemma that I face when we come to do our meeting package. As our chair, we've started to meet prior to our meetings to go through the agenda items and make sure we have things as streamlined and everything as we possibly can. But the volume of information that we need to whittle down to figure out what's most important to put in front of you guys this month, it is a massive challenge. And I apologize because I don't intend for our meetings to be, you guys sitting here for 2 hours listening to all the cool things I've learned in the last month. That's not the intent. And I apologize when we get a little bit too long in the tooth kind of going down that part of things. But it's a question of finding the sweet spot on the reporting. And so, I always try to adapt and evaluate and we always try to make things better and make sure that we're suiting and fitting the audience. And so, whenever you do an event like this, I mean, I have to admit, for me, my first lesson learned was I should have asked for more help, because I tried to do as much of it on my own, and we did a pretty good job. But I'll be quite honest, Alan, when I realized I'd missed you on that email, I was mortified. And I am so sorry. And
It's done.
Yeah,
It's all good.
I know, but it was an oversight, and it was just because I had so much stuff on my plate that as I was doing that email, I missed a name, right? And sometimes that's the difference between having absolute success and really screwing something up badly. It can be as simple as missing somebody on an email, right? And so that's where having more resources and being able to make sure that we're consistently doing things properly and that we're consistently hitting the high standard we want to achieve is incredibly important. Councillor Quilkin, you are exactly right. To your point, the reason I think that the site selectors were so impressed is many of them came in going, well, Edmonton's the end of the world. There's nothing north of Edmonton, right? And I mean, at least two of them had said that. They had no idea that we had all of the economic, like, for them to realize there's a city of 100,000 people northwest of Edmonton, they went, what? Or that it's, 6 hours from here to the Northwest Territories. It was funny because just prior to the conference, Paige phoned me one evening and he said, dude, he says, I've got to tell you, he says, I didn't realize Alberta was this big. He says, I can get from Nashville to Oklahoma to this and that, 6, 8, 10 hours, right? But he says, I just drove from Calgary to Jasper, stayed in Hinton, and drove into Edmonton. And he says, I'm not even halfway up the province yet. Like, what the heck, man? You guys are huge up here. And so I think that, we helped to establish a new frame of reference and build some new partnerships. And we just have to keep working them. And I'm really excited to hear that all of you enjoyed your experiences as part of it. And we did our best to put a local flavor and a Canadian flavor and everything on it. And the casino did an absolutely wonderful job of, I think, incorporating our First Nations components. We had a smudge ceremony and a prayer to start us off. And then the Wednesday night, or the Thursday night entertainment for the keynote was a drumming circle and two dancers. And I mean, they're Grammy nominated, right? So I mean, that just in and of itself kind of rang with everybody that was there. And we had economic development people here from Lloydminster to High Prairie to Camrose, and it was I think really well attended that way. And as you mentioned, Lac La Biche County is very interested in hosting next year, Greenview the year after that, and Red Deer possibly the year after that. And I did tell Paige, I said, well, maybe we can have you back in 5 years. So Alan, I completely agree with you. We need to do a list of lessons learned and what would we do different, and that was part of the rationale behind putting the survey out.
So I want to follow up because, and this goes back to my earlier point about the agenda and how the in-committee session was left to the end and often not covered in the 2 meetings prior to the SiteLink conference, where I think we should have negotiated as the host for our councillors and our committee members to attend. Mm-hmm. I've had this discussion with Bert, and I'm not going to belabor it. I think that was a missed opportunity.
Yeah, me too.
I want to focus on the positive that's come out of the conference and the insight that it's brought to the region. And my takeaway that really came out of the presentation on Saturday morning about how municipalities need to partner with third-party businesses and identify those site areas that move us from the site deny list to the site acceptance list. And I would like an action item potentially for discussion and follow-up from this committee, because as I move to finishing my term with the committee this fall, the takeaway that I got from that is, have we identified in Woodlands County our third-party businesses and corporations? I know ANC is top of that list, and we're a big part of that conference. But what are our actual top 20 third-party private land sites that when we host SiteLink 2.0, we change the discussion of that conference to now, not only do we have a base set from the first conference, but that we go back, and it goes back to what I said about global energy, is who are our major business partners that are at that conference. The conference is great, the information is great, but if we're not connecting with our business partners, either regionally through the province or locally here, which was the event that we tried to host last fall at the casino, where we took our business people who have this private land, we identify them and we engage them in a conversation about how that development can move forward, recognizing that they don't have to share that information with us, and often will, in a very private way, want to handle a lot of that negotiation and development on their own and discreetly. But we missed that opportunity, and the in-committee session was the place for it to happen, but we never got to those agenda items. So if we move forward, my big takeaway from this, and I heard it directly from the SiteLink people themselves, is who are your third-party people in your county, so that when we make our shortlist up, you get to the shortlist. And so that is the action item that I would like this committee to move forward, either to council or directly to our EDO, and say, in the next 3 months, I would like to see a list before I leave as an Economic Development Committee member of the top 20 businesses and the private land that they occupy that could make the shortlist of a SiteLink developer. Because when we host 2.0, we want not just the council and the committee members there, but we want paying sponsorship by those 20 companies, if that's what that list is going to be. Because then they come to that 2.0 meeting and go, not only are we the third party people sitting here at that, but we might be a third party and that is not connected to any of these business ventures at all. But because we have property in the county, you could approach us as a potential site. So whatever you want to develop may not be our business at all. But because we have third-party land that we can bring to the table, we could work with another company and develop that in a collaborative way, and actually bring this development to this region. So to me, having that list of companies and land, right down to how many acres they have, that's what I want to turn my EDO on right now, and use my time as a committee member to go do that research for us, start getting that plan together. Because unless I heard something wrong, if you're not on that third-party list and have that information right at my fingers, within 2 weeks, I'm going to make a decision as to whether or not I'm going to bring this development to your region. And if you don't make the list, you don't get to play in the ballpark. So to me, that was, all of the things, by having more time to discuss the in-committee items earlier in the agenda, where those decisions, because I was mortified when I called Bert and I said, what do you mean the committee members aren't helping out? What do you mean they're not introducing the speakers? What do you mean they can't sit in on one session? Because if I would have known that back in December, that would have been on my list of things negotiated into our arrangement with Paige. And honestly, I think it could have been done. It might have cost us a little bit more money,
Of course,
but I think it could have been done.
Yeah, you just
So-
build it in.
For sure.
And I'm back to your point on that, and I think that's, so my motion to the committee would be to have some discussion on this, and then bring a motion forward that we actually identify our third-party businesses that could make a positive contribution to a SiteLink 2.0.
So you're making a motion?
Discussion, and then I would be willing to make that motion that our EDO does that research for us.
Just want to make just one comment. It's not just for SiteLink 2.0.
It was for everything.
No, we have the relationships that we've built with these people that came up here. If we do that list, it goes directly to those people now.
Right.
Not in 5 years from now.
Oh, I would hope so.
Okay, Patricia.
I just wanted to build on what Art said, actually, because I am very much on the same wavelength. I want to come out of it with a similar motion. The key takeaways that I had were, first off, absolutely thrilled it happened. You know, I think that what we can learn from that is great. My number one key takeaway is what is shovel ready? And where is our list of shovel ready? Because exactly like Art had mentioned, one of the speakers had said 2 weeks, and he said he has 2 weeks to make a decision. So he's calling Bert, and he's gonna say, what do you have shovel ready? And you have 1 week to find it. And by shovel ready, they're talking about what have the environmental assessments already been completed on? What, you know, maybe if there's some discussions to have with adjacent property owners and so on, have these discussions already happened? So these are the things, and he said, so even if you haven't done the environmental assessment, he said, by the time that I call, that land is no longer available because you haven't done your homework. So, and I think that was the number one thing for me, is that I think we need a driving force immediately to work on shovel-ready list, you know, and start, what is this county land? Do we have, what's involved in accessing it from the province? You know, so that's part A. The other part is the importance of resource corridors. And in looking at it now, like they talk about the A to A line and these resource corridors. I know right now in the province, some of the candidates for UCP are talking about resource corridors. We have a corridor along Highway 43. And the resource corridors they're already talking about, of course, are for, you know, highway, rail, fiber, pipeline, etc. And some of these ones, they're talking 10-kilometer wide strips through. So then my question becomes, in the Highway 43 corridor that we already have existing with highway and pipeline, what is along that corridor that we can look at accessing from the province, and how do we make it happen? And I realize, you know, at the moment, sure, there's obviously the issue of not having the money or whatever it is, but I think that we need to figure out what exactly is this gonna cost? What exactly is the process? And if we don't have the money today, what money do we need to make that happen? And obviously, I don't want a tax increase, but if, you know, I was just polled about the municipal center, do I want $7 an extra a month on my taxes for a municipal, or for the municipal center? Well, I guarantee I would pay $10 a month extra on my taxes to have a resource corridor that's gonna bring business here. You know, so I think those are some of the things we need to focus on from an ECDEV perspective. And the other thing is really pushing with these guys. They said on Saturday, it needs to be top of mind that you're pushing the how low our taxes are in Alberta. That is one of the number one things that when they heard earlier, the impact of the government legislation. So 2 parts of this, definitely federally, it's chasing people away. Provincially, it's chasing people away. We have some, you know, one person I thought would be a great UCP candidate that was gonna put their name forward that actually declined because they said, I'm pretty confident I can win, but the party is so divided that it would be very difficult going forward. And that currently is our economic climate federally, provincially, and unfortunately, municipally. Looking at it from a business perspective, and I mean this respectfully to everybody involved, but municipally is what can be controlled here, and we still have a problem politically, municipally in this area. And until that relationship is fixed and going forward, and we can look at the front page of the newspaper and see an alignment in our region, then that is having an impact on bringing business to this area. And I don't think that we can ever discount how important that is on every level. And what's getting printed in the media becomes the reality for our residents. You know, so I think the things that we can change locally as a municipality and as an ECDEV committee are focusing on those regional relationships and repairing those, getting our shovel-ready land accessed, working with third parties like Art had mentioned, to make sure that we have the list and we can even explain to them, hey, you have this land, have you done an environmental? Because maybe this third-party owner doesn't realize they're not shovel-ready. They might think they've got the road access built in, so of course it's for sale, they're shovel-ready when they're actually not. So I think that's where we can partner and communicate with these organizations or these owners.
I just wanna, when Greenview County has done their area,
Absolutely.
it's, I forget what the EDO said, it's taken 12 to 14 years to get it done.
Yeah.
So, and millions and millions of dollars that the county has put into it. And you're saying they still don't have some of the environmental stuff done.
Yes, yeah.
So it's nice to say we gotta do this, but just remember, it takes a long time.
I completely agree with that point, but if we're not making, the first step is the plan.
Yeah.
And if we don't have the plan to plant the tree, then we're not gonna be reaping the fruit of the tree.
Exactly. Peter?
I think as well, one of some of the information that we need is what do we want to put here? Because in order for us to understand what type of land access we have, because these fellows, the conversations I have, they fund anything from 5 million to 200, 400. So in other words, we have to, as an economic development committee, start to understand exactly some of the things that we need here, not just specifically, if we're specifically looking for it for increasing our tax base, we're back into the old model of exploitation. I think we have to look at this from a perspective of this, what is the long-term investment going to be? What is important as far as the people is concerned? And the big one for me is we need to go back to the education component as well when we understand that and say, do we have that education base or ability to deliver that in order that these companies can be successful? Because it's not just the land component, it's the complete picture that we need to understand. So I guess for this is going to be a tough one, because now that we've had the discussion, there's a number of things now that we are going to have to identify as an action item, and then we're going to have to figure out how we deliver on that. So I guess that's, I think that kind of encompasses what are our next steps.
So I don't know where the discussion's going. I know that in concept, Art has a motion that he wants to put. I also want to say, I apologize, I missed that link in that survey. I read all those presentations, but I just looked at that survey and it makes sense.
Okay.
What I would like is, I'd like to read the responses. And so if we make a motion that the survey responses get distributed to the ACTEV committee.
Yep.
So I make that motion now.
Any questions on the motion? Call the question, all in favor?
Thanks.
Carried.
And then I'll turn it over to you.
And I think in the spirit of the conversation we just had, I'd also like to make a motion that we then ask our EDO within a 3-month period to come up with a regional third-party business list, including the services, acreage, and identify that group as potential candidates for future work with SiteLink initiators.
Okay. You want to repeat the motion, Bert?
I certainly will, and I think really, the province, they have their deal book that they put together of kind of their 100 top best leads, and I think that's what I'm hearing from the committee is we need sort of our version of a Woodlands deal book, right? And so we did our best to have the ANC site presented, have our airport site presented with our partners. We presented the best sites within the area. We had the opportunity to talk about some of the commercial stuff from White Court, some of the commercial from Mayor Thorpe. So we kind of did it on a regional basis. We didn't do it in a book form, but I really like this motion because it gets us into where we need to go. So our kind of a friendly amendment, just that we develop our version of a Woodlands deal book within the next 3 months.
I don't know if I like the idea of a deal book, but I really want the a list of potential business,
List of our top industry partners on the land that they have available.
the land that they have available, as well as the state of that land, the number of acres, is an environmental assessment done, and approach them with the idea that they could be partners on an investment project simply because they own the private land. And that gets them to the shore. So now I'm kind of explaining what I want done through the motion, but is that what's in the deal book as you describe it?
Yes, so the challenge that we have is that we can make introductions, but as was mentioned, we have to be involved in the negotiations, right? And so this is where we've had several other potential projects in preview. We'll have a conversation, and when you need a development permit, come and talk to us, right? And so that's the process that we have to leave it to. But there's no reason that we can't have a listing of, what are our top 10 or our top 20 kind of sites. That's sort of what we had done, and we had presented to the site selectors when they were here, but we haven't had the opportunity to put it into a solidly written form and maybe have all the conversations that we need to have, right? Like, we did have a couple of other significant players who we approached, and they just flat out said, no, we don't want to be part of it. So I mean, that's the other part of it too, is that we can have our inventory in our minds, but we need to get the buy-in from industry that, yes, they realize it's important. So I think that's kind of the second part of what you're saying is, we need to talk to our potential site owners and to help them to identify who the partners are and the profiles of the land that they have, and put that into one resource.
Yep.
Is that
what I'm looking
a fair
for.
summary?
And if you send me that other deal book or deal plan that you've got,
Well,
I'll look at that as well and do a little
Yeah,
research.
so this is the problem, is Invest Alberta has the provincial deal book, but they only release it to a few folks. It isn't one that's publicly available, but that's what and we have submitted information to them, and I know we have local companies that have submitted information to them, but whether they're actually in the book or not, we don't know because they haven't publicly released it. Right?
Patricia?
Will Parsons was the gentleman who spoke about the list and the shovel-ready criteria. Could you please reach out to him, because he had mentioned he has a checklist
Yes.
and of what a site criteria is. And I would like to see that checklist incorporated into that book. And then that's a checklist that we could share to these third parties and so on, and say, this is what this is what developers are looking to see completed.
And I think he's got part of that, I think, was in his presentation, and I know Paige has his checklist within his presentation, so we do have some good guides to kind of build from there.
Okay, perfect, because the idea would be to develop our own Woodlands County checklist, of course.
And in the past, we have also had through the Growth Rita a site selector checklist, and so we know we can reach back on that as well.
And this is all stuff we would have learned. We were at the sessions and we would have made this a lot faster.
So you want to repeat that motion?
Sure, so I hope I've hobbled it together so it makes some sense. Talk to our potential investment partners to identify, talk to our potential investment partners to identify our top sites and the related land. I've got that worded really badly. Talk to our, there we go. Talk to partners who are our potential investment partners and to identify and my goodness, I did not write this down well. Talk to our potential industry partners who are our top potential investment partners and identify their opportunities. No, that still doesn't make. Anybody?
Al's usually
What
the
do you
big-
call, what was the name of the group that the province put out?
So they call it the Invest Alberta Deal Book.
Okay, so could we say model after the Invest Alberta deal book, potential landowners / investors within the county?
Thank you. Sometimes you just need help. Model after the Invest Alberta Deal Book, okay?
And let's include the idea of cross-referencing that with the checklists, so that that information appears if there's some.
Yep.
And in the meantime, whatever you can send me about these deal things, I'll do some background work on it too.
If you go to the Invest Alberta website, they might have it public now, but you can check the link on there.
Can you repeat that for him? The
Yeah,
checklist?
I'm just, chicken scratching this out, but I think I've got it now. Modeled after the Invest Alberta Deal Book, work with our industry partners to identify our top investment possibilities.
And cross-reference them with site link, presenters, checklists to add additional information. I really like that idea.
Yeah.
And then we have our own binder, and this is important work that we do for council. That when council goes out there and says, you know what, we're ready to go the next step on development here, and not only have we brought the appropriate people who can direct that investment, but we've also worked with our local partners to identify those low-hanging fruit areas where investment can occur quickly, and even though it may be a 5 to 8 year investment plan before some of these projects go through, we're just still giving we get a chance to make the short list.
Yeah, it's the start.
Yeah.
In the little better than 4.5 years I've been on this board, we have never done this. This is new to this board. I'll say we dealt with a lot of fluff, but this has meat and potatoes to it. And one thing that I want to bring to council is in Bert's position as the EDO, he's doing parade floats, you know, all this other stuff. And that has to stop. He has to be able to do his job.
I couldn't agree more.
We have a motion on the table, right?
You?
Okay, call question. Everybody in favor?
Thank you,
Carrie.
everyone.
I do have something I'd like to add. So in addition to this, and I know some of it overlaps a little bit, but I would like to consider for discussion, put forward a motion for the EDO to prepare a report on land use and potential availability along the Highway 43 corridor. So within, say, the same time frame, like for maybe our October meeting. But I know on the committee side, I would like to be able to have access for people that are looking to do business here to show exactly what is there so that we can make decisions going forward and looking at whether we have to approach the provincial government to access land, what that looks like, and so on. But I think that would be the first step in that process.
We do have the business park study that we had done jointly with the town, and it analyzes exactly that.
I mean border to border of Woodlands County.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing?
This goes border to border along
Okay.
43, 4 kilometers north and south. So we do have that report on file, but we can bring it to the September meeting to do a review.
Okay.
Because there are some updates and some things that we possibly should take a bit of a closer look at. But yeah, and I don't think as a committee we've ever really had a full discussion on the business park study. But part of that flows back into some of the other conversation about the role of Woodlands County as Do we take on the role of the developer, or do we engage a P3, or do we look at, because all of that, there were three parts to the business park study. So part one was to identify potential areas where we have the ability to attract and to grow in some key market sectors. Part two was the analysis of the highway from border to border, 4 kilometers north and south along 43. And then part three was looking at potential models and how we could bring a business park forward.
Okay.
So we should, if we haven't fully discussed it, we can bring that forward for the September meeting. And we can send it out to everybody beforehand for perusal.
If I remember right, wasn't there a group of people doing a Highway 43 study, or do you remember that, Bert?
Yeah, so the other part of things that we've kind of, I won't say that we've lost, but it kind of came to the end of where the province wanted to take it, and we've kind of put a question mark on. But what was incredibly interesting was it was very easy to get both Greenview and Lac St. Anne County on the same page as us when it came to SiteLink. And I think that we have the opportunity between those three municipalities and then the urbans that are within for us to put forward and do some kind of a Highway 43 corridor analysis. So we know that it is part of the Countymex Highway program. We know that the Pacific Northwest Economic Region Conference is actually being hosted in Calgary this year. We unfortunately won't be sending anybody to that, but I know the focus of Penware always is on trade corridors. And we do have an initial proposal from Drayton Valley as well, where they want to look at a central Alberta trade corridor. And they've actually asked if they can come and present to us at our September meeting, because they're just putting some of their information together. So that would be utilizing the Cowboy Trail to further come up to access onto 43. So there is certainly.
Let's stop and
Okay.
we'll finish the motion.
Okay.
We'll call the question. All in favor? That is carried.
Okay, so
You can bring all that information back
yeah.
in September.
Yeah, because what happened was the provincial part of it ended, and so
Yeah.
we haven't met.
Bert, you can bring that back, everything in September.
Just a quick comment on that, when you had mentioned, and I know back in September, but if it's Drayton Valley and it's Highway 22, really, that wouldn't have a lot to do with us and Woodlands, because we're not attaching to that anyway, right? Would we?
But they're proposing a whole central corridor going north-south, so the answer is
Okay.
yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and that's why they wanted to come speak to us in September. Again, this goes back to that, what can I filter out, right? Because, yeah.
Okay, next is blue sky discussion.
I guess some of the things that we were going to do in the blue sky discussion, we've already covered. And I think one of the interesting things was, I floated a few ideas on the agricultural side with some of these SiteLink guys. And it's based on, the food security piece, which in the current, in the current picture, there is nothing really there. And one of them was franchising slaughter facilities, which would be something that would have to happen on a provincial level, because you can't access the market streams that you need to access unless the concept is way bigger than just what we have here regionally, but also the education component that goes with that. So these are some of the things that these guys were sitting there going, oh yeah, that makes sense, because they in the United States struggle with the same monopolized system, which basically undermines the economic development in rural areas. So was a bunch of these discussions that we had that those of us who had those, and I'm carrying on with that discussion with a couple of them right now to try to figure out how you would accomplish that. How would you get that into the view as being necessary within the province? And we have some vehicles that we can do that with. But I think that a lot of the stuff that came out of this SiteLink conference, there's some definite things, that are going to be on the table, that they were very interested in, that we need to pursue. But there's a lot of things that are going to be long-term, that are gonna have, that we can only start and hope like hell that the next committee that's going to be sitting at this table is going to be able to sink their teeth into. And I guess that's where we have to rely on the regional EDOs to say, okay, how can we position this so that it'll be a constant topic and that it's important and that is something that will help regional development. So, you know, those are just some of the things that we discussed. There was a ton of them, and some of them don't serve a purpose at this point in time to go into.
Patricia?
I'd just like to comment on what you had mentioned there, and I know something that I want to look into a little bit more and see if I can even bring back to the committee in what some other economic developments in other areas around agriculture and around farm to table, sustainable, so on. Because right now, one of the biggest things we're dealing with, of course, is the increase in food costs. And with the price of fuel and bringing food into areas and food stability and so on. And we have a lot of producers in the county. And the problem is right now that I see is I'm not aware of who those producers are. So as a resident, so when I go to the grocery store, I would really like to be able to have a nice little list here in front of me and pick up the phone and, you know, go to Jane for my eggs and Bob for my beef and whatever it is, but there isn't a quick, easy, concise way to access that. And I think as an economic development committee, that's a task that we really could look to bring, benefit to our residents, to promote economic development within a region and keep our money at home. So that definitely even coming into next year. And I know one of the areas that I was looking at is what they did is they started originally with a volunteer base and they built this food hub, they call it. And they've got it to the point now that you go online once a week and you order your groceries from the local producers. And they've built a distribution center that has a community kitchen. If you're a jam maker, for example, you can go into this community kitchen and make all your jam for sale and book your time in the kitchen. And when you had mentioned about franchising meats and, you know, that kind of thing. So basically, I could see that being a benefit to a hub like this that essentially gets it out to the community. The other thing they've even done at this other one I was looking at is they're down to even having meal kits, you know, so the same as your HelloFresh kind of deal, but it's a not-for-profit, it's local, it's keeping the local producers and connected to the local residents. So I would just, it's not that it's a huge moneymaker, but it's a great way to support the community.
Actually, Bert had his hand.
Oh, sorry.
What was incredibly surprising at the energy show was agriculture was not mentioned. And that was one of the key industrial sectors where there was absolutely nothing. Like even in regards to putting hydrogen on farm tractors, it wasn't even mentioned. And food security was the other part of it. So those are two items that are definitely flying under the radar. And in regards to local food production, we do have our local business directory, so anybody who wants to, they can list on there. Most of the producers have to sell through a farmer's market. And then we do have the two farm stores that are currently in place, and we do have an application for a third. So those are really the only official things that we can put forward at this point. If producers do want to sell and do things privately, they need to go through the development permit process and everything with us. Do we have the potential to build out some commercial kitchens and better utilize some of the halls and some of those things? Yes. But right now, it's largely up to the local forage associations or the ag societies to decide what they want to do and how they want to proceed. And I know we're starting to see those discussions starting to happen, but there's probably more discussion at the Ag Service Board table about that as well.
Okay, Peter and then Al.
Well, and I guess one of the, you know, when you look at all of this stuff that's going on, it's people that are dealing with, this is what I want to do as a business. the unfortunate part about it is, and you talked about it in the regulatory process, even for land development and stuff like that, is that if you have a roadblock where you, for example, as a beef producer who wants to go gate to plate, and you have to book the animal that you're going to eat when it's born, and not be guaranteed that you have a place for it to be killed under the regulatory process, you have a problem in your marketplace. And I think these are the things that have to be fleshed out in the development of the slaughter facility, because that is merely a machine in the complete value chain. And, you know, there's been studies done, and we have in the county here somewhere have one, haven't found it yet, but that identify not only because the regulatory process affects vegetable producers, it affects, you know, in a lot of cases, these things that are happening in farmers markets are just not being monitored at this point in time because it isn't a challenge to the status quo. The minute it becomes a challenge, we have a problem. And so these are the types of things that economic development committees are going to try to have to figure out, and as the demand for, you know, that food security increases. So it's going to be interesting.
Just a comment on that community kitchen. The community lunchbox program in Whitecourt is looking to expand their facility and incorporate a community kitchen that people can rent out. They've got a number of different strategies behind it, teaching kids to cook, that sort of thing. So
Nice.
There's been a request for Topland Hall to be a community kitchen as well.
Okay.
now that project for the community services is like, it's not tomorrow. They're fundraising for it, right?
And there is some things like with a commercial kitchen, of course, you know, like with health code and so on.
Yeah.
There's a lot more strict, definitely,
Yeah.
but no, that sounds great, so.
Okay, with that, running out of time here, so we'll go to constant never-ending improvement.
Do we need a motion to accept blue sky discussion items?
Just if I can quickly just highlight two things. So the Community Futures Yellowhead East Business Resources page, a great resource there for any new business that's starting out. They have a number of grant windows and that sort of thing, and different resources that are there. So that's a relatively new thing for the Community Futures page, but again, our friends there are doing a wonderful job in getting resources out there for our potential entrepreneurs.
Okay, you wanna make that motion, Al?
Sure. Move that the Economic Development Committee accepts the blue sky discussion items as information.
Call question? All in favor? Carried.
So under the CANI, just for everyone's information, I wanted to make sure that we had included this item. The UN Declaration on Rights of Indigenous People has been around for a while, and it was formally adopted by the Government of Canada in the fall of last year. And so that should be the guiding document that we use as we're pursuing and building our new relationships with our Indigenous partners. At several of the meetings that I've been at recently, it's been mentioned that not every group and every organization is even aware of UNDRIP, let alone agree with and have kind of aligned their efforts with the things that are laid out within the document. So I wanted to make sure that we had the county aware, but we did have at a Fox Creek BSN meeting just recently, it was mentioned the importance of making sure that we're following not just the guidelines and the intent, but the spirit of the agreement is that our First Nations communities would like to see us show up because we want to, not solely because we have to. And so that was probably the key takeaway.
Okay, Art.
When I saw this on the agenda, I didn't think it was business for our committee. I thought this should be forwarded to council and that they should be adopting this, and it should be uniform across all of the work of the county. I was surprised to see it on our agenda that way, because I don't want to accept this as a committee and not have my council on side with it, or the other committees as well.
Yeah, fair enough.
Do you wanna make a motion to send it to council?
I would like to have this tabled and move forward to a council agenda.
So what if we do two motions? So what if we accept and then, so you want this
Let's just
table?
move it straight to council. I don't think, I don't wanna accept something and then put council in the position of now discussing it. I think this is leadership from council.
Okay, can you give me your motion then, so that I
To
understand?
have this tabled and move forward to a subsequent council meeting for their discussion and acceptance.
Move to a future council agenda, okay. Okay, so to table from our meeting and move to a future council agenda?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions on the motion? Call the question, all in favor? It is carried. You had it.
No, that's fine.
Okay. Next is the information items.
So our standard reports are there. What was incredibly interesting is our population has grown, so we're now back above where we were according to the population loss that was indicated in the 2021 census data. So that's province-wide, not individual municipality. In regards to the economic review and the economic indicators, what is incredibly interesting coming out of those is that there are now more people working in Alberta today than there were prior to the pandemic. So in regards to economic recovery and bounce back, our GDP might still not quite be there, but for the number of people working and for the weekly average wage, those are both above where we were pre-pandemic, and so that's good news. The economy is definitely on the grow, and we are definitely moving forward. And then the two personnel notes at the bottom, I had the opportunity to meet her recently, and we have a meeting scheduled for later this week. Nicole Nellis from area for the Ministry of Jobs, Economy and Innovation, and so she replaces on a permanent basis Cami Curry, who was with the province previously and is now with Curry's Can. And Carol Webster has accepted a full-time position and is now a business specialist for our area with the Business Link, and she will be continuing her other pursuits along with that, and has some relegated staff and that sort of thing. But so those are the two new economic developers within the area, and that's pretty exciting stuff.
Any questions on the information?
Move as presented.
That's what I was gonna say.
Okay. Any questions on the motion? Let's call the question, all in favor? Carried. And seeing there's no in-committee session, we just need an adjournment.
Well, and the next meeting date, I would propose, as I'm going to be taking off between 4 to 5 weeks this summer, if we could make our next meeting date in September. And so the third, if I'm looking at my calendar correctly, third Tuesday would be September 20th. And I think we've got that in the calendar already.
And just before we leave, I would encourage everybody here that has questions, please contact Bert. Don't sit on it and let it stew. If you have a question, call. I know I do all the time.
It's pretty
I,
accessible.
well, I really appreciate being able to speak with everyone, and as Art has indicated, yes, you know, we do have kind of those chats from time to time, and I am here. I do want to do my best to be accessible, and I will be the first one to admit I am far from perfect, and you know, there's never a shortage of things going on and happening, and so please, if you've missed something or if you have a question, I would appreciate the call, you bet.
Just to kind of add on something you had mentioned earlier, and I had actually mentioned this to Bert before, but one of the things that I would like to see when you said, like, you know, Bert doing parade stuff and so on, and when I was at the trade fair, you know, I'm looking at, for example, looking at the town, you know, they have their booth, you know, manned with paid staff and with volunteers as well. And I really do think that we need to ensure that we're not being asked to spend too much time on things that are not bringing economic development back to the county, things that can be delegated to other people, so that your plate is a little bit more clear. And in that essence, one of the things that I would like to see, and I don't know if it requires a motion, and even now hearing, like with vacation, I'm thrilled you're getting that you're taking that time off, and I know you worked a ton of hours and so on, you deserve that. But one of the things I would really like to see at the very, very least is a summer student that we can get on grants or something like this to be an assistant to you during that 4 months of the year, something that's gonna be low cost to the county that we can fit within our budget. Ideally, a full-time assistant to handle the things, the menial tasks or some of this type of stuff, you know, with agendas and reports and so on, that your skills and your skills are better utilized elsewhere. And I think that to support you best, we need to look at working to what you're best at, not wasting your time doing some of these other things that we could have someone else do. You know, so I didn't articulate that as well as what I would like to, but essentially, you know, if it requires a motion that coming into next year, that we put a motion forward that the EDO has an assistant student in the meantime or something.
Yeah, that would be part of a council budget. So what you could do is just recommend to council to include in the budget an assistant to the EDO.
Okay. Yeah, then if that's, thank you. Then I'd like to make a motion that we make a recommendation to council to look at the budget to assign, to hire an assistant for the EDO.
Okay.
As part of the summer program.
I would say full-time. If not full-time, then as part of the summer program. I'm sure it's not in the budget right now for full-time, but as part of the summer program, then.
Definitely not right now.
No, but I think that it's a recognition by this committee that you know, council needs to look at supporting our EDO, because he is a managing director of that department, and that we're starting to see that there's some assistance needed there. And the other part of it is that, you know, if we're going to become more involved as an economic development committee, council has to know what is the cost of that going to be.
And we need to grow our tax base, and that is our job here, is to,
Yep.
you know, is to increase our tax base, and we can't do that without support.
With that, any questions on the motion?
I just want to make sure I have it worded correctly, so to make a recommendation to council that the county hire an assistant to the EDO, or should we say consider? Or do we want to say adding additional resources to economic development? Or do you want,
I think I would leave it with hiring an assistant,
okay,
or the recommendation of hiring an assistant.
That'll all get fleshed out.
I'm sure
No,
it'll,
I'm sure that it's there now, so.
yeah.
well, and we do have another round of budgeting coming up, starting this fall, and you know, I'm happy to say that much as our economic data kind of points, it's time to look excuse me, time to look forward, not back. So
Absolutely.
Okay, with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor? Carried.
11:25.
Discussion on
Thank
that
you.
first.
There's no discussion on adjournment.
Thanks, everyone. Go and end our stream.
Oh.